All right, good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome into the Nifty Q Show. I'm interviewing founders, leaders, and awesome builders in the NFT industry. Today I'm sitting with Caps, product lead of NFTX, co-founder of FloorDAO, NFTX, a liquidity and lending borrowing protocol for NFTs. We'll be discussing DeFi's role in the industry, how you can earn daily yield on your assets, what the recent APE token launch means for the space, and much more. You're also outshining me a bit, Caps, on your PFP here, man. So I want to give you a big shout out there for your Hearst and Cool Cats combo, man. How you doing today?
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've had this cool cat for a long time. Not quite at mint, but just shortly after, and yeah, never selling, never selling.
I love it, man. We're gonna have a cool convo. You sound like you're very deep into the DeFi integrations. Obviously, NFTX is a really cool protocol, and you guys are doing some things on the fringes of the space. There was a little piece there where you guys at home saw me mess up about what Caps is doing. It was like a kind of a cross communication here on what we were talking about today, even, and I'm excited to talk about FloorDAO as well as NFTX. So we've got a lot of things to get to. The one first thing I wanted to start off with, though, is there was a story last week about some gigabrain dude swapping apes from your guys' pool and then claiming the ape tokens and then putting the apes back into the pool. Don't go too far in deep into that kind of tech and what actually happened behind the scenes, but what actually went down with that flash loan.
Yeah, so I've been like heads down like building for a while, so I haven't like investigated that transaction like fully. I know a lot of people have, but the kind of the idea is essentially with the vaults in FTX, you can instantly swap out a floor item for a floor item in the vault. Um, Without any counterparty. So you could just like straight like insta swap, just like you would on Sushi or Uniswap, and pull out any of the items in the vault. So essentially, what happened was someone cycled through everything that was in the ape vault, swapping it out, minting the ape, and then swapping out that one for another one that had unminted ape. And we saw something similar happen with Cool Cats, with Cool Pets. There was probably maybe like 4 or 5 people that were all trying to get in on that trade. And we had, I think, like 20 Cool Cats in the vault at the time. So that was about 20 pets that got minted in a very short period.
So
And there's some cool like repercussions in that.
yeah, we're starting the episode with like a dangerous kind of situation for some people that like put into the NFTX protocol, which I think for the more experienced people, like we understand that it's not necessarily dangerous. You just have to know what you're doing. You mentioned the Cool Cats piece there, and that there were people that were all trying to do this at once, and then you also said that one of those people was you.
Yeah, so yeah, there was a bunch. Like, I mean, you have an edge when you're building the product to know how these things work, and I'm not like at the level of writing contracts to automate this, and to win gas wars against like MEV bots. I mean, when you look at what happened with Bored Apes, like that was like $1 million opportunity. So, whoever did that was like automating the hell out of it and making sure that they could front run all the competition.
Mm.
Whereas I think with Cool Cats, it was very much like a fight over like a manual process.
Okay. So we'll get deep into the processes of NFTX and what that all means. We kind of hit somebody who has no idea what y'all are doing with like one of the craziest things that's happened on the platform here in just a second. But I guess like staying on this kind of conversation. So someone basically within one transaction was able to pull these apes out and then claim and then put them back in. You kind of have to school me on the tech there.
Yeah, so there's a swap fee on the NFTX vault. So let's say you have like a floor ape. If you have a floor ape NFT, you can pay like I think it's 6% of an ape to swap for another ape. So let's just say apes are 100 ETH. Like you'd pay 6 ETH to put your floor ape in, which presumably you've already minted the ape, and then you'd pull out one from the vault that has unminted ape. You'd mint that and then drop it back in and pull out another one and just keep swapping and paying 6 ETH every time. And obviously, if the value of the mint of the ape is more than 6 ETH, then you're good and you're making profit. But we can talk about where that 6 ETH goes as well, because I think that's the main that's like the big driver for why people add liquidity and like enable this kind of activity is that they get paid those fees.
Yeah, we skipped a couple steps there. Usually I like to kind of lay a foundation. We've got some comments here. Absolute Salt saying there was no penalty for that question mark. So definitely we'll get into like the processes, but do you want to quickly touch on whether there was like a penalty for that person doing that?
No penalties, no. Like that's all profit. They would have paid the 60th, but if they were making more on the 8 mints, then yeah, they'll just be profit. The loss is like, and it's not really a loss, but the loss comes from the liquidity providers of the APE token. So the people that had been providing liquidity for APE, and I think we probably need to go into NFTX like mechanics to understand this part a bit more. But they basically could have minted the APE themselves, but instead they were getting paid 6 ETH a pop, and like, but the difference being they didn't have to do anything, like they were just passive. um and yeah,
Yeah.
there's a couple other benefits as well.
Yeah, well, let's get deeper into what NFTX does here in just a second. But for anybody at home, TLDR, someone just pulled out a bunch of apes, claimed all the ape tokens from last week, made a shit ton of money, and yeah, walked away a lot richer. But from that Cool Cat situation, did you end up profiting at all, Caps?
Yeah, I think there was like a total, like I wasn't necessarily like able to do as much as you could because it was being fought over. But I think yeah, it's 20 cool pets. What were they selling for, like 3 ETH a go at their top? So that's like 10k each. Yeah, so that's like a 200k opportunity. So a lot less than the ape one, but yeah, there's lots of like alpha with this DeFi NFT crossover for sure.
Yeah, love it. And we'll get into some of that alpha. So shout out to everybody that is showing up early. We just pressed live. This is the Nifty Q Show. We're covering the NFT space. I'm sitting here with Caps, both from FloorDAO and NFTX. So we're going to get a lot of good information. So Caps, usually the way this episode starts is we talk about your background and then we set that foundation. So let's hop back into that timeline and let's talk about who you are and kind of how you found yourself in the DeFi and NFT space.
Yeah, so I don't know how far back you want me to go, but
All the way.
I guess I discovered Bitcoin a long time ago, back in 2011, when I was playing online poker professionally during like university time. And there was Black Friday. Any online poker players will know about Black Friday. Basically, online poker was banned in the US. And that was like a time where Bitcoin suddenly, like I'd heard of it, but then suddenly it became obvious that there was going to be like a different way of playing online poker using Bitcoin. That was back when it was sort of like $20, $30, and it was almost just plain money back then. And I just kind of had my eye on it. Built a couple of Web2 businesses in crypto, and then sort of 2016, after being like a bit of a Bitcoin maxi, discovered Ethereum, and was just kind of heavy building again like Web2 stuff in Ethereum. And then it wasn't until 2020 with DeFi summer that everything kind of clicked in terms of like the massive, like much bigger growth than we had in like 2017 kind of clicked for me. And yeah, 2020 was like DeFi year, and then I discovered NFTX at the start of 2021.
Yeah, let's.
Um,
I
yeah.
we skipped a couple pieces there. I don't know if people at home actually are pissed off whenever I want to like hear about that 2016, 17 time because I was like very much a part of it, but I feel like it gives people good context on like how the space has grown. So in 2016, you were saying you built some web or I guess crypto companies. Can you kind of relay any context there, and then tell me about your time in the space in that like Bitcoin to 20K era of like ICO times?
Yeah, yeah, so like Web2 side, like it was really just like around affiliate marketing, which you might be familiar with. So yeah, just building like a network in that area, which I kind of moved on to Web3 like a few years later. And yeah, like that was around 2016, 2017, and so I kind of witnessed the whole like massive explosive growth, all the ICO craziness. Didn't participate in much of the ICO stuff because was just kind of building, being heads down, just ETH maxi, ETH is money kind of vibes. And yeah, got like mega wrecked in the bubble, as everyone else did. But you know, that's what makes you build like extremely strong conviction. So I owe like a lot of my conviction I have with ETH to like the 2013 bubble with Bitcoin, and then like the 2017 bubble with ETH. You know, these things always seem to, if they've got fundamental value anyway, come back a lot stronger.
You mentioned you were a Bitcoin maxi and then you're an Ethereum maxi. Are you a DeFi maxi or an NFT maxi now? Like, do you classify yourself as like going heads down into whatever sector you're actually building in?
Um, I'm like ETH maxi at heart, and DeFi like for me, I probably like align more with DeFi. Um, and I think like my big interest in NFTs is largely around like their application in DeFi. Um, Despite like yeah, I'm like a huge NFT fan generally, but like yeah, I think when you cross it over into DeFi, like the opportunities just become a lot larger.
It's hard to talk to Bitcoin maxis these days. It still was back then. What is the bridge you think between maybe Bitcoin and even DeFi? Because I feel like there is that connection. Like Bitcoin was, you could claim one of the first decentralized finance, protocols and all of these different things. So, is there something that we could say to Bitcoin maxis, or something that you say to Bitcoin maxis, trying to explain that DeFi isn't like all a Ponzi?
Yeah, I tend not to speak with maxis like Bitcoin maxis too much to like know how to answer that. Um, yeah, I think probably like I have a lot of time for Bitcoin, still do, but yeah, I think what we're seeing is just such a massive extension of what Bitcoin was capable of doing. Like even just the borrowing and lending platforms. Like people from Bitcoin tend to yeah talk about Ponzi's and like zero sum games and stuff, but just being able to like take a loan out against some collateral, whether it's like ETH or even like a real world asset that's tokenized, if you can borrow against that, that's just like a huge utility just in itself. Um, 2020, I was borrowing against ETH using liquidity and like not having any interest to pay, just like a one-off fee, and then I was able to like buy stuff in the real world while not having to sell my ETH, um, which at the time was like $300. So
Mm-hmm.
so by borrowing against it, you can have that upside without having to sell, and still have like the fiat money that you might want to use.
Gotcha.
So that's like one obvious utility, yeah.
How do you look at risk in the DeFi space? Like I know there's an obvious risk to doing what you were doing and having ETH maybe fall in value as opposed to like continue in value, and you're able to like kind of claim your ETH back. How do you look at risk when it comes to decentralized finance?
Um, I tend to just zoom out really really far. So I'm kind of like a lot of my mates just take the piss because I have like a 10-year time horizon with all this stuff, and I think the risk essentially goes away with something like ETH if you look at it from a 10-year perspective. Like we've got like some major like potential systemic risks with like the merge and stuff, but if things like assuming no black swan, like yeah, in 10 years time is ETH going to be worth more than it is today? Like almost certainly. Um, yeah.
Most of the people I have on the show are like very NFT focused and NFT native. And I'm not saying that you're not NFT native. I'm just saying it sounds like you're more into the DeFi space, which is awesome. So when DeFi summer kind of took off, tell me about your experience there and kind of lay some context on why DeFi and having that kind of pop up on our timeline in the world was important at the time.
Yeah. DeFi, like for me anyway, DeFi kicked off with Compound. I don't know if you remember
Yep.
Compound with their yield farming. Like that was like a sudden like it became obvious there was going to be like liquidity wars. There were going to be people like fighting over like what was pool 2 stuff. So like all the they were kind of zero sum, they were kind of circular, but there was like a real like demand to try and fight over that. So yeah, I mean, I was messing around with Compound and Wi-Fi and YAM and all those kind of protocols that came out, and synthetics and everything, obviously. So like, yeah, had a lot of experience with that. Aping into stuff at contract level and all that kind of good nonsense that was going on back then. And then when DeFi Summer ended, I kind of have had my head down buildings throughout the whole of 2021, and then into 2022 as well. So at the same time, also like big on NFTs and like getting involved in drops. Huge fan of a lot of the art block stuff. Um, I love like what Gen Art is doing as well. Like tons of PFP projects, but I've taken my foot off the gas a lot with as I'm sure many people have now that we're going into a bit more of a sideways market, focusing back on building.
Yeah, was that your experience at the end of DeFi Summer? Because again, most of the people watching this are going to be like NFT focused, so they're kind of experiencing maybe a little bit of a downtrend when it comes to like the hype cycle that we saw maybe last summer and fall. Is that kind of the same cycle that you saw happen in DeFi? Are they experiencing the same thing, or was it like way more massive for someone that is new to the space?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like necessarily hugely qualified to talk on that, but yeah, I think from what I've seen, it seems like both DeFi and NFTs had the same cycle, like a very similar cycle anyway, where they had like a few months of like pure up only, and you can't make a bad trade, into like you can't make a good trade, and it just becomes the whole market's just squeezed out, um, and everyone's just got to take a break for a bit until it comes back again.
Yeah, everyone here in the chat and listening in at home afterwards has had their fair share of bad trades, whether it be NFTs, whether it be DeFi or ICO tokens. So at the end of that cycle, or maybe even in the main DeFi summer area, what were some of those projects that you were like, damn, I wish I didn't get into that one?
I got lucky. I didn't actually get rugged, or like I didn't. The closest I got came to getting rugged was in Eminence, but actually like didn't end up getting rugged. But that there's like, yeah, probably I don't know what would be like the worst one. I mean, I
So
kind
you're
of got
that
out
good a
super
trader.
early. No, no, no. I'm like long-term trader, so I don't tend to make like regular. I'm like a low frequency. Don't make too many trades. Just like buy and hold.
Mm.
I kind of got into uni and got out of sushi, just kind of longing on innovators rather than like necessarily like forks. So yeah, I don't know. Like, obviously never sold the top, held through a lot of that. So like uni held it up to $40, and that went down to like 7, that kind of thing. So it depends on whether you're looking at it as a long time frame. Like in 5 years, I think uni will be higher than $40. So I'm happy.
You mentioned Eminence there. I think that was Andre's project. What's your take on Andre? I always get his last name right, Cronje, and him
Cronje.
leaving Cronje, and him like this guy was like DeFi. For those of you at home, this guy was like DeFi Jesus. Jesus. He created Wi-Fi. He's like one of the main guys responsible for DeFi Summer, and he's just like a really volatile individual. And now I guess he just left the space like a month ago. So, do you have any takes on Andre?
I was following Andre a lot in 2020, and then again like something else I peeled off from in 2021. But yeah, I mean I remember when Wi-Fi first launched, there was just tons of money aped in, and there was, I think it was like a 2 or 3 multi-sig, or no, maybe it wasn't. I think it was even just like Andre had the full control, um, and it was like $300 million or more. Um, and like for I can't remember how long, but there was no time lock or anything. He just had like direct access to this, and credit to him, like he like people were DMing him as like, yeah, don't worry about it, like I'm gonna switch this to a time lock and multi-sig and whatever, um, and yeah, he did. So I think he has a very honest, like he just wanted to build cool things, um, but yeah, I don't know what's kind of changed over the last year to make him want to leave. Um,
Yeah,
it's all gonna be mad.
Yeah, this is cool because we can talk about kind of the DeFi integration into NFTs. I think you'll have a really good take on this, but I want to stay on DeFi for a second longer. I mean, Andre like specifically has talked about the user base in DeFi and that being one of the main reasons why he's leaving the space or why he was pissed at the time. They're just he mentioned them being toxic, like all this stuff. Do you see that in the DeFi space of like the users in that sector just I don't know, like not being favorable for growth? I don't know, like the mercenary aspect of jumping from protocol to protocol does DeFi have that longevity long term when you have maybe people searching just for yield?
I think long term it does, but yeah, day to day you're gonna get like tons of mercenary activity. Like you can have like one down day in a token price and people are complaining. It's hard to. I think it's probably is draining if you have that constantly for so long. But yeah, I guess you could just like mute, I guess, and just carry on. Um, if you're confident in the product, you're confident in the fundamentals, then you shouldn't have any problem just continuing down that path, and just kind of ignoring the noise.
Last question specifically on DeFi, I hope, or maybe not. We'll see. Fair launch. I know Andre was like pioneering that type kind of launch with Wi-Fi. What do you make of fair launches now in the space, and maybe how it relates to NFTs and how people like to distribute?
Yeah, so Wi-Fi had that like, I think they call it like immaculate conception, where it was just I think it was just like people staked their tokens and like liquidity, and it was just they earned their Wi-Fi tokens through that, and it was really like just open to anyone. Um, I think fair launch makes tons of sense. I mean, lots of people are working on it. I forget the name of the protocol now, but I know Will Price is working on something that is like an interesting, novel way of distributing tokens at the start. And then like obviously copper launches, reverse Dutch auctions, like with balancer liquidity bootstrapping pools and that kind of thing. These are like, I mean, FloorDAO went through one of those, and I think it is a great way of like avoiding being botted and avoiding having your like token supply sniped if you don't price it correctly. So yeah, makes tons of sense. I guess like the distribution kind of happens after launch anyway, and the launch, the fairness really comes in like how much do investors and insiders how much do they have of the supply, I guess.
We're tying this into NFTs, and I think we're making our way to FloorDAO and NFTX. How do you look at distribution within the NFT space right now? Like I know, Hashmass was, I think, on am I getting this wrong? Bell curve, kind of like a FOMO ramp, all these different types of distributions. How do you look at distribution in the NFT space and the way these founders are launching their product?
So yeah, Hashmass did that bonding curves, which are like, yeah, just these tranches, which drive FOMO, which worked a few times and I think kind of fizzled out. We like at NFTX anyway, we don't deal with any kind of like launches. Something we will do in the future, but what's cool about NFTX is the NFTs that are in NFTX are all fractionalized. So you have ERC20s, like just any kind of like standard token like DAI or WETH, that you mint from these NFTs. So like the CryptoPunks pool or the CryptoPunks vault on NFTX has a punk token, and that's like a fractional token, so you can have like 0.0001 of a CryptoPunk. You suddenly get like more interesting ways of distributing when you can fractionalize like that. And yeah, it's something that we're looking at, and how maybe you can do certain like launches as an NFTX vault, and then that way you can kickstart with like floor liquidity as well, which is another concept. I probably just need to go back to basics and explain NFTX.
Yeah, we're almost. I mean, we're right there, Caps. But the main question I have, and probably the most important question of the interview and the episode, is going to be how you see DeFi working its way into NFTs and why it's important. Because there's a ton of people in the NFT space now that are going to get more familiar with DeFi over the years. Maybe they won't even know it's DeFi. They'll just start to understand that, oh, maybe I can lend my NFT. But kind of lay that foundation for breaking down NFTX by bridging the DeFi space with the NFT space. Like, why is it so important that NFT enthusiasts pay attention to DeFi's move?
Yeah, so I guess the reason NFT collectors should care about DeFi is like they can suddenly turn their assets into like yield generating ones. They could just do more with their asset. So for example, you could lend your asset to someone and get paid an interest rate, or you could borrow dollars against your asset and use those dollars in some way without having to sell your asset. And you can earn yield just through like something like NFTX, where you're providing liquidity and letting other people trade with your asset. So there's like the obvious like revenue generating side. I think like when you get to like in-game items and stuff, so like I've had a long time playing Steam, like throughout like my teen years, and having like the ownership of your asset is just so much more important than like having an asset that's like on some centralized database, just because you can then integrate it with things like DeFi, and actually you can start doing stuff with them. So yeah, I think those kind of yield generating and utility, like expansion of utility, is like one of the key reasons why you'd want to use DeFi with your NFTs.
Okay, let's talk about founding NFTX. So you mentioned kind of being a part of DeFi Summer, getting involved in NFTs. So kind of want to also add on to this question of like what NFTs you initially got kind of involved with, but also kind of laying that origin story bare for everyone to kind of listen to.
Yeah, so I joined NFTX like a month after it launched. So the reason I joined was I minted hash masks, and at the time it was like, yeah, these are great, but I kind of wanted to do something with them just like out of curiosity, and I discovered NFTX, and basically I put my hash masks into NFTX, fractionalized them into a mask token, and then I provided liquidity to Sushi with the mask ETH pair, and then I was earning like trading fees of people that wanted to trade on Sushi to swap between mask and ETH. People that wanted to buy mask or sell mask. And what was cool at the time was like Sushi was doing on-sim rewards as well, so I think that was like 10% APR or something on getting like extra Sushi rewards from your hash mask ETH.
So there's already a mass token at this point, though, correct? Like launched by the team.
Yeah, I forget what they have, but yeah, the NFTX mask token is like a floor token that represents the floor price of the hash mask.
Okay. Okay, we skipped a couple steps. Like we went directly down the rabbit hole where you're supplying liquidity on Sushi Swap and all this stuff. So talk about like NFTX and what it actually does for like the end user at home from like a lending and borrowing standpoint. I know you mentioned the importance of DeFi and NFTs there, but specifically for NFTX, like what are users doing on the platform now?
Yeah. So NFTX doesn't do any borrowing and lending. It just has like it's just basically a really low level building block for NFT DeFi. So how it works is of like a collection with say 10,000 items, maybe 1,000 of those items, 2,000 of those items are floor items. You could basically pool your floor items in the NFTX vault. Let's just say the hash mask vault, for example. You could put your floor hash mask in there, and you'll mint a hash mask token. That's an ERC20 token that acts as a claim on any of the NFTs within that vault. So the idea is like all floor items are kind of treated the same, and in that way you can pull them together, and then you can create this ERC20 token off the back of it that is then usable in other protocols on Ethereum. So like ERC721s are like hard to trade and swap. You have to wait for buyers, you have to wait for sellers. Whereas when you have an ERC20, you can then so you've got this ERC20 that represents the floor. You can then put that into Sushi as liquidity, and then people have suddenly got instant liquidity for the hash mask floor. So anyone can then instantly sell their hash mask into NFTX, which routes through the Sushi pool, and then you can instantly sell, or you can instantly swap like the guys did with Bored Apes or Cool Cats, and you've also got the instant buys.
Yeah, there's a really cool conversation we're about to get into, but just touching on that process there, someone that's on that protocol on the NFTX protocol, make sure that you understand how the swap process works. Because if you put an ape in, you're not necessarily getting the same ape out. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah, and that's something like it's really important. If you're using NFTX, it's for your floor items, not for anything higher up. So like the arbitrage, basically what would happen is there'd be an arbitrage. If you put in
A
like a
gold.
non-floor ape,
Yeah.
yeah, that's instantly getting like probably just bought or swapped out, and then it'll be swapped out and replaced with the floor item. So yeah, the incentive is to put in your floor items, and if you've got like a really low floor, maybe the price of the NFTX vault is kind of trading higher than what you have, you can then insta sell um, into the NFTX vault
Okay.
and get a better price.
Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about how that guy swapped out some of these apes, and he paid a fee to the actual protocol, and that you mentioned that goes somewhere. Can you explain the actual like process of how you're developing kind of revenue for either the DAO or the actual people who are staking their NFTs? How does that process work?
Yeah, so let's use the Toads vault because someone actually the Cryptodes vault, someone just minted like 400k of liquidity for that. So what that person did was they put in, I think it was like 19, yeah, I want to say 19 Cryptodes into the vault, and they minted the Toads tokens. So they minted 19 Toads tokens. They then paired that 19 Toads tokens with like 70 ETH, and then put that into Sushi. And then once you put it into Sushi, you get this token back that represents your liquidity position in Sushi. You can then stake that liquidity token from Sushi in NFTX, and then you'll start earning the fees of people that trade in the NFTX vault. So anyone that does a buy, sell, or swap on the Cryptodes vault will generate a fee, and that fee will go to not just that particular liquidity provider, but anyone else that's providing liquidity as well. And one of the cool things that we introduced like 2-3 months ago is the idea of single-sided staking. So rather than having to provide liquidity, which can be expensive, right? Like that guy had to put up 70 ETH to pair with their 19 toads. Instead, we now allow people to just stake their toads without pairing it with ETH, and they earn like 20% of the rewards, while liquidity providers earn 80% because they take on more risk. So we've got like those two ways of increasing the NFTX vault size. So there's more selection, like more choice, and then with more liquidity, there's more depth. So there's less like price impact when you make one of these trades.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions off of what you're kind of, breaking down here. But one of the main questions is like, since origin, how does that total value locked look? Because that's, for those people who aren't familiar with or the DeFi space, like total value locked, TVL is like a primary health indicator of your protocol. You want to continuously see that, go up on some stairs there, like a nice little price chart. But how does that total value locked look over time since NFTX launch? Was there immediate use of the protocol, or was it kind of a slow grind? How has NFTX evolved since its origin?
Yeah, so relatively slow grind. Obviously started from zero. The founder Alex Gosman did a pretty cool launch where the NFTX token was distributed in return for CryptoPunks, and NFTX actually raised like 100 CryptoPunks from that. So it started off with like a solid TVL. And yeah, it wasn't just CryptoPunks, some others as well, but yeah, the TVL like kicked off quite well, and then from there it's grown over time. There's a June analytics dashboard for it, but it's at an all-time high at the moment of 47 million, and each month in the last 30 days there's been over $1 million of fees generated for liquidity providers and inventory providers. So yeah, the growth has been like relatively stable. There's a lot of layers to understand to use NFTX. It's not the simplest, which is kind of where FloorDAO comes in, because that's like an accelerator of everything that we're doing.
Yeah, I want to talk about FloorDAO here, and I guess we can have that discussion here in a moment. How do you make NFTX accessible to someone who is just in NFTs? Like, you kind of laid out the cryptos process of like the guy, doing multi-sided liquidity, and you did say that you can do single staking now and things like this. So that makes it easy for someone to say, okay, I have a single NFT, there's already a pool created, I can earn on that yield. But like, how do you make this accessible to someone who just doesn't know shit about DeFi, right? Because those people are just like, I'm done, like I have no idea where I am.
Yeah, it's a problem that we've had. I mean, we've abstracted all that stuff I was talking about, like sushi pools and stuff. That's all abstracted away on the front end. So when you come to NFTX and you want to like add liquidity for the Toads vault, you don't have to deal with sushi. You just sign a transaction on NFTX and it will do it for you, like under the hood. So we kind of abstract that away, but there's still like concepts that you need to be aware of. Like if you're providing liquidity, you have to like understand the risks of doing that. Like it's not just like number go up, like you have impermanent loss to consider and stuff. So that's where like single-sided staking or like inventory staking, there's none of that risk. Well, the only risk you have is like NFTX protocol risk. Otherwise it's just like the token just earns yield. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I guess what we hope is like the yields start getting to the point, and I mean they can be high, like for certain vaults they can be really high. We hope that those kind of yields attract people to like do the research and kind of understand DeFi to feel comfortable to add liquidity. We don't want, in a way, we don't really want people just aping in liquidity, because you've got to like understand this, otherwise you're going to have tons of questions and it might not work out for you. So I think the more we can educate people, the better, for sure. And it's just hard to do that on the front end. It's just too much to understand, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, you guys have an NFTX Academy, and we could tie in FloorDAO here to kind of like round up that kind of, or I guess intro that conversation. But is it probably right for me to say the easiest way that someone brand new to what you guys are doing in NFTX, the easiest way for them to get involved in this ecosystem is to maybe find a pool that they have a floor NFT asset on, and they submit to that pool single-sided, and they start earning tokens for just staking their NFT asset.
Yeah, that would be the simplest way to kind of familiarize yourself. And like gas is low-ish, like depending on the time, but relatively low at the moment, so it's like now's a good time to do it. Um, yeah,
What are
that's
the
the best way to intro.
what do those yields look like, and what do they get paid out in?
So it varies from vault to vault, but like if I open up NFTX right now, like the top yield is for, and to be fair, like we do this as a 7-day yield, and I want to expand it to 30 days so it's a bit more accurate. But like the Milady vault, I don't know if you know like Milady Maker NFTs.
I saw
Um,
it.
yeah, had insane volume. I think that peaked at like a 1400% APR, and that was like pure organic yield. But there's no like NFTX governance token distribution that's pumping up that APR. That's purely from what's being traded. So if you're providing liquidity, you were getting like 1,000, 1,400% APR, and right now if you're providing a venture, you're getting a 345% APR, which is insane, and that will come down. But you know, we'd see like if I go to like the pools page on NFTX, you see like APRs like well in like the mid two figures, right? Like 50 like percent and above. Um, yeah, it for like Punk at the moment is like relatively low. It's like 10%. Um, but these are kind of variable, but it's all purely organic yield. And I think as NFTX gets bigger, and for example, like we're integrated with Gem, the aggregator, NFT marketplace aggregator, that will drive more volume. You know, our inventory will get seen in more places. Because this inventory all lives on Web3, all lives on Ethereum, so it can just be plugged into any other marketplace without permission. So the more places our inventory goes in, the more volume, the more yield for LPs. So yeah, we can expect. I'm hoping anyway. The expectation, the hope is that we'll see yields just increase over time.
Okay, and those yields come from the volume traded on the platform, correct? Like for the most part.
Yeah, it's purely volume traded on the platform, and,
Okay.
and it's not like the front end. It's actually the volume traded in the contracts, and anyone can plug into the contracts, like Gem, for example, or Genie.
Gotcha. How does FloorDAO work into this? Because again, we had those like that mix up early in the episode. Like you honestly thought you were coming on here today to break down FloorDAO, but you're doing a great job breaking down NFTX as well. So how does FloorDAO play into what you're doing? Because it's such a big part of what you're doing on the day to day.
Yeah, so FloorDAO was started by NFTX core team as well. So there's a huge like overlap and like tightness between these two DAOs. But FloorDAO is like a well, so the way it works is it uses the bonding mechanism of Olympus, which if you're familiar with Olympus, you'll know how that works. And the market making of NFTX to build a treasury of blue chip NFTs that earn yield. So FloorDAO's goal is basically to get as many blue chips into its treasury as possible, and all those blue chips will be used in NFTX to earn yield. And then that yield is then kind of like by proxy kind of goes back to like the floor stakers, the floor token stakers. Um, and yeah, FloorDAO really is a way of creating deep liquidity for these NFTX pools. So one of the problems that we have with like the vaults on NFTX is like you can't have a collection, or a vault won't work if it's only got like 10 items in it, because the price impact of buying an item, and this is like how the sushi AMM works, which is what happens under the hood. But like the way that works is like if you only have 10 items and you buy one, the price impact will just be huge. So you might find that like a CryptoPunk, if there's only 10 CryptoPunks in the vault, the buy price might be like 200 ETH, which is just like not a non-starter.
Mm.
So you could still like speculate, so you could still buy like a fraction of a CryptoPunk and you get like a roughly close to spot price. But if you want to buy a whole CryptoPunk, you're going to get big price impact. So FloorDAO like solves that in that we build deep liquidity for these. So for example, with CryptoPunks, FloorDAO has now 20 CryptoPunks, with all 20 paired with ETH to provide deeper liquidity for the CryptoPunk pool. And we're going to do that to other collections. So we've done it for Wizards as well. We've got like 700k of Wizard liquidity, and we're now like token holders will get to vote on which NFT collections we add next as well, so that we can essentially like coordinate liquidity for these vaults. And we think like people will see the value of instant liquidity for NFT collections, like the floor of NFT collections. And once people see that value, then people will want to use Floor to direct liquidity to different collections. Like, it gives holders the ability to instantly sell and instantly swap. It gives holders the ability to like use DeFi more effectively because there's deeper liquidity, more reliable price oracles, and all this good stuff. And also gives like in the case of CryptoPunks, it gives people access to like fractions of a CryptoPunk, so they don't have to buy a whole one to be exposed to that market. And there's other schemes like you could do buybacks as a creator. You could start buying back the token, the Floor token, with like the treasury that you've built from the initial sale or whatever it might be, so that they can start supporting the price of the Floor, and actually like putting their money where their mouth is and buying just fractions over time.
There,
There's cool stuff like that.
there's so many, like you mentioned, like 4 or 5 different reasons why this process is really cool, because it like price oracles is one example. Being able to have creators come in and buy their own Floor tokens is like a really cool flywheel effect there, if they can create an economy there. How does a project like APE, where before APE token launched, you guys probably had some type of like derivative token, or I don't know the exact terminology, but what happens when the NFT project itself launches a token? Because in the absence of that, you guys can really have that token, right, be almost seen as getting exposure to APE. Like that's one thing you mentioned as well, is like you could, as a buyer, go in and probably buy a CryptoPunks token, and that Punks doesn't have a token, so that almost acts like a stock of that NFT in a way, if it was like mainly adopted. So how does the Ape coin factor in, and if that happens to more and more projects?
Yeah, so it does. If there's more utility with the NFT like 71 NFT, then yeah, people might want to take them out of the vaults. But I think what we hopefully see is that there's so much to pay attention to, right? Like I got more, like I'm involved in more NFT collections than I could count, and I can't possibly like spend time knowing like how to maximize my yield on every single one. I missed like mounts on Wizards, right? Like that
Yeah.
would have been cool to have, but there's so many things I've just missed. And instead, like by just sitting my floors in NFTX and providing liquidity, I can just earn yield on all the stuff that other people want to do. And yeah, I won't optimize my yield because I won't do all these like really niche things, but instead I'll just have like a simple way of accessing the yield to some extent by just letting people trade my and like swap out my items. Um, so it does definitely, in a way, like pulls NFTs out of NFTX, but at the same time it also generates yield, and makes like LPs, like liquidity providers, happier as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so and tell me if I'm wrong here, but we probably have like 10 minutes, 15 minutes left in the episode. I know you had a hard stop, so if we have to cut it short, you let me know. But we're going to get into some FloorDAO questions. I want to open it up to the chat as well. If you guys have any questions for the NFTX team, definitely drop them, or FloorDAO team, drop them there in the chat. Also, for the editor, this is not for the audio portion afterwards, but this is for people here. Go ahead and drop OVOT in the chat. It will get you entered into a giveaway that we have going on right now for some Opal Jets from Star Atlas. We will run that giveaway here live and pick a winner at the end of the episode. But yeah, let's hop back into it, Caps. Tell me a little bit more about how FloorDAO kind of acts as I wouldn't say you're not manipulating, but you're coordinating was the term that you used in stabilizing kind of liquidity there. Is that the primary function of FloorDAO?
Yeah, yeah. Floor token holders coordinate liquidity to build deep liquidity in collections that kind of that are like stable and that have the benefits. So we have like a framework for like which collections the DAO will like choose to buy up and provide liquidity for, and it involves like largely is like what's the yield potential and what's the capital growth potential, and like risk. So if the collection like passes through that, then floor token holders can vote on which ones to actually like build liquidity for, and then by doing that we have all the benefits of that liquidity.
How does FloorDAO and NFTX DAO work together, if at all?
So yeah, FloorDAO just is built on top of NFTX, so it relies on NFTX protocol to generate yield. So NFTX is like FloorDAO's yield strategy, and right now there really isn't any other like generalized yield strategy. So technically, like FloorDAO could apply any yield strategy, but this like NFTX is by far the best right now. So that's like the tight alignment there. And then in terms of like how we launched, rather than taking on any VCs or investors, we didn't do a seed round or anything. It was purely just like self-started. We instead did a loan from NFTX DAO. So NFTX DAO provided a 500 ETH loan to FloorDAO, which bootstrapped the liquidity in a copper launch, and then that 500 ETH loan was just paid back straight after the copper launch. So we ended up with NFTX DAO getting a 2% allocation of total supply for that loan.
Was that a governance vote?
Yeah, in NFTX it was, yeah. So
Okay.
that went through governance. It went all on chain governance stuff, and it just like it's great because typically you'd have investors or VCs that a lot of them don't sell, but there is like a lot of future sell pressure there. But with NFTX, like their floor holding is too valuable to ever sell, because they will always want to have a say in what FloorDAO does with their inventory. So we've kind of like done this raise through debt with a DAO that's so tightly aligned that they basically have diamond hands for this and won't ever sell. So it was really cool to launch in this way, and I think we're going to see more like sub DAOs launching like this, without the need for like potentially mercenary investors.
I haven't looked into the NFTX token price, nor do I like really hone in on that during these episodes, but it sounds like you guys have a lot of cool things happening in the ecosystem. What are some utility pieces for the NFTX token other than the governance pieces that you just talked about? And why should, not investment advice, why should I be buying this token?
Yeah, yeah. I guess with NFTX, we kind of at the moment take like the Uniswap approach, which is like not very exciting at all. Like ultimately, it has on-chain governance, so you literally can vote on what to do with the treasury and what to do with the protocol contracts. But there is no staking. There's no like rewards for holding NFTX. It is just a governance token. So that said, like we're building this TVL, the NFTX treasury is like quite valuable. I can't remember how much, but it is a significant sum, like 20 million maybe. And there's with a governance token, there's any kind of potential. Like you could vote to do something that maybe finds a way to capture more value into the NFTX token. So that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, another common practice in DeFi is incentivizing yield by using that governance token. So you mentioned it's NFTX is used as a voting token, also that it's used to incentivize yields. That seems like a lot of sell pressure and not much buy pressure when you're talking about utility, right? Like if you're incentivizing yields with NFTX token, where does the buy pressure come from?
Yeah, so that kind of like incentive there is on FloorDAO. That's the floor token that coordinates liquidity and lets people vote on where liquidity should go. Whereas with NFTX, there isn't that kind of voting. There is just governance on like standard governance stuff. I think the holders of NFTX are very much like long-term. This is strong-handed long-term investors, more so than like anyone expecting a yield. So there is. I think there's not like a huge amount of buy pressure, although I think the DeFi NFT narrative might change that.
Mm.
But I think the sell pressure is also like kind of vanished because we kind of bottomed out. Like it got dumped pretty hard. I don't know who would be left at this point. Like
Yeah.
who's left to sell?
Yeah, being attached to that DeFi NFT piece that you just mentioned is going to be a boon for you guys going forward. But yeah, DeFi is taking a hit. here over the last year for sure. You mentioned coordination with FloorDAO and getting some of these pools set up because stability is super important. You also talked on earlier in the episode about APE and how all of this stuff is kind of the wild, wild west in a way where someone could do anything. You know, I could go on right now while we're live, set up a pool. If someone wants to enter, they can it is completely open. It's a protocol. What are some things that have happened that aren't coordinated by you guys that maybe you look at and you're like, damn, that was smart, or that was kind of a crazy event? Because that happens in DeFi, right? Like there's all these flash loans and all these kind of crazy moments. Has there been a moment on NFTX other than that Ape and Cool Cat example that we had early in the episode?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that does come to mind is I don't know if you know, or you will know of Loot, but a derivative of Loot was Genesis Mana. And this was cool because it kind of signals to me, I think, what we'll probably see happening moving forward, where Genesis Mana is like, so each loot bag, with Genesis Mana, you could like extract mana tokens from each loot bag, and the idea was that you had to like swap your mana NFTs to get like a set, and with a set you could resurrect what was called a Genesis Adventurer, and so there was tons of trading activity to try and build these sets and resurrect these adventurers, and we saw just insane volumes on NFTX because there's nowhere else could you just like do such simple swapping between items. So what was cool is like with the manifold, like most of them are treated as floor tokens. So loads of them were in NFTX. I think we had like 500 at the top, and people were just able to build their sets really quickly and coordinate their sets really quickly. And what was crazy was like the yields for LPs was at the time, I think for like a 10-day period, I think it was like 3 or 4% a day in yield that was being earned. So there was just like crazy activity, and like I think a hint as to what NFTX might be able to provide in the future, where we'll probably see more and more like card trading games or just trading games in general, or like game item swapping, anything like that, having this like pool of assets where you got tons of different people that all have different needs and demands. They can just instantly swap to get what they want. Yeah, just I think it's going to be a big driver for yields, and that those yields then the flywheel for NFTX is like those yields then drive more liquidity because people see the yields going up, so they put in their liquidity, which gives better liquidity for people that want to trade, and that drives more volume, more yield, and then so on.
Yeah, are you guys actively looking to find, I don't know if partner is probably the right word for a protocol, but are you guys actively looking to find like other examples to recreate what happened with Loot? Or is this all kind of inbound and you just grow your product and see who joins?
Yeah, so that was inbound. And we do have Toes, who's on BD and does an awesome job with partnerships. And I think generally like we benefit from partnerships, but you know what scales best is just by like showing people like this is what our protocol unlocks. Like you should just use it, rather than we shouldn't have to convince everyone to use it. People should just know that like, oh shit, a liquid floor is like a major game changer for this collection, so we should probably like think about, in our strategy, think about it. And like I know Doodles had like a proposal towards the start of their launch, like I can't remember how much they were going to seed like 100 ETH into NFTX, and unfortunately that never went through. And maybe that would have been where like someone really pushing and saying, hey guys, these are all the benefits, would work. Because I think Doodles would have had an awesome time getting a liquid vault up, and just the benefits that come with it. So hopefully, that's where FloorDAO comes in as well, and we're going to start showing what a deeply liquid pool can do for a collection, and then it kind of word of mouth goes around.
Yeah, great answer there. Appreciate that breakdown. I've got a lot of good comments here. Guys, if you have any questions for Caps here, we have about 5 minutes left in the episode, so definitely lay them out here. I'm going to roll the wheel of names that we had the giveaway on. I think, Prodigy added the Nifty Q Show logo. Look at that. I'm going to pick a winner real quick, Caps, and then I'm going to have you kind of drop any other information as it's related to the NFTX or FloorDAO platforms. So congratulations to XPOW on winning the giveaway here on the Nifty Q Show. But yeah, Caps, drop any other info you have on NFTX or what you guys are doing with FloorDAO.
I think we've covered so much. I'm not sure. I mean, if anyone's interested, the FloorDAO, like the kind of longer term vision for FloorDAO is to move towards a VE model. Like I don't know if anyone's familiar with Curve Finance and how they use their vote locking to vote for where liquidity should go. Like we're looking at the VE floor as a future thing. But that's a long way off. We're early stages on that. So yeah, come join the Discord. Discord.gg/invite/FloorDAO, and hit us up on Twitter as well. Yeah, we've got an awesome community, small but growing, and yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely kind of tell, right, that you guys are going to have a pretty strong community that's going to have some interesting people in it and some smart people as well that are pushing the protocol forward and getting committed to the DAO. I had a question from Asmodai here, and this was something I wanted to touch on earlier when you were mentioning single-sided staking, double-sided staking. Asmodai saying, do these liquidity pools suffer impermanent loss? And, you know, from the double-sided, it makes sense. Like if you're on Uniswap, most people understand that, but how does that work with an NFT, that impermanent loss piece?
Yeah, so yeah, you're exposed to the same impermanent loss that you might have for anything else. And yeah, the way it works is, yeah, you fractionalize your NFT into an ERC20, and then you just pair it with ETH and add it as liquidity, and you have the same. It's like the same experience. NFTX front end hides all the sushi liquidity adding stuff, so you don't have to worry about doing it, but that's what's happening under the hood. So with liquidity providing you have impermanent loss, with inventory providing you don't have any impermanent loss. What's cool though is like you are pairing NFTs with ETH and they are somewhat correlated. So if you're familiar with impermanent loss, like the divergence of those two assets might not be as big as, you know, if you're pairing it with USD or anything else.
Yeah, Caps, you did a good job explaining the protocol in like a layman's term, but also kind of getting in deep. If my last question is probably someone that's listening to this right now, either on audio afterwards here on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or here that's live on YouTube, how do they experiment with the protocol without getting absolutely wrecked? Like, what's the best way, one or two ways to kind of interact with what you guys have going on without just like losing any of their NFTs or, you know, getting massive and permanent loss or things like this?
Yeah, I mean the only way would be, yeah, first of all, understanding that any NFT you put into the vault, into NFTX, cannot be recovered, potentially cannot be recovered, and instead you'll just get a token that gives you a claim on any of the NFTs in the pool. But there are fees as well, so just to be aware of like the fees. But to experiment, yeah, inventory staking. If you single side stake with just inventory, then you skip the fees as well, so there's no fee on the entry. So that'd probably be the best place to start, and then to join the NFTX Discord and check out and ask questions. Like we've got some great guys on support as well who are just really quick to respond to anyone that has a question. So hit us up there.
Dope, man. So I got one last comment here. Dismal Jellyfish is saying NFTX unlocks additional utility for projects. My favorite project has a roulette vault that allows users to pay the vault token for a chance to win a rare NFT from the project. That's a pretty cool utility piece. Do you know what project he's talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, HD Punks. Hey, Dismal. Yeah, HD Punks allow you to like, well, they've got a few different vaults at NFTX, but one of them is locked. So one of the things you can do with NFTX, as well as like random buys, it's not just like choosing which you buy. You can actually, it's a bit cheaper to just randomly buy something from the vault than it is to select an item. And some vaults can turn off all the targeted buying and lock it purely to random buy, which is, you know, a little bit more fun. Changes the use case a little bit, which is cool.
Caps, last question I've got, man. When do you think we'll see like a full DeFi integration in NFTs? Like, and I know you said you're a 10-year timeline guy. Do we see like more like a billion TVL in NFTX here in like the next year, or like when do we see that like full merge, or people are familiar and, you know, it's getting more adopted?
Yeah, I mean, this year I'm hoping, you know, with FloorDAO like leading this, I just can have like a big push on awareness. Like I'm hoping we have like a DeFi NFT spring and summer,
That'd be
and
dope.
yeah, yields pick up. And like super bullish for me is like aggregator wars, right? Like the more people use aggregators over like OpenSea, the more they'll be exposed to DeFi inventory, like NFTX's inventory. So that would drive yields, and like yeah, that could, depends how quickly that kind of stuff takes off. Um, but yeah.
Awesome, man. All right, we had Caps here, product lead from NFTX. He's also the co-founder of FloorDAO. We broke down pretty much everything DeFi NFTs, man. You did a great job breaking down the liquidity protocol, what you guys are doing in the future. So, Caps, I appreciate you stopping by the Nifty Q show today. And everyone at home, thank you so much for tuning in and participating in chat or listening on the audio portion afterwards. We will see you guys this week or next week. We'll just break down the NFT space and continue kind of growing here. So appreciate everybody. Caps, thank you again, man.
Thanks for having me on, man. That was great. Cheers.